Hello again, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for another Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy. On the fire danger chart here, we've got extreme back in the picture there for the Yukon Flats area, surrounded by a bigger area of high fire danger. Out to the west, that area has actually shrunk there near and east of Kilbrook. And then over the Tanana Valley, same thing, a little less in the way of fire danger, still zone of high in there, somewhere between, say, Fairbanks and possibly as far west as Tanana. And then this area in the Copper River Basin, due to the rainfall they've received, barely reaching the high fire danger status now, especially compared to what it was yesterday. And moving on to satellite imagery, here's the clouds that brought the precipitation in over the southeast interior, some of that extending north and northwest along some convective, precipitation more convective in nature back to the northwest here with some isolated thunderstorm activity embedded in the clouds. Showers look like extending all the way out to right there around that portion of the north slope. Otherwise, east and west looking pretty good again, with temperatures rising into the 70s up there in those areas. Pretty nice conditions, even some sunshine out along the eastern Arctic coastal areas. A few more clouds back to the west, but nothing serious. Some breaks here over the west central interior, Seward Peninsula. And then we've got this system sliding east and northeast, bringing actually a couple of systems. The first one brought rain into the north, or the one that brought the rain into the North Gulf Coast, southeast interior over the last 12-24 hours. That brings some precipitation in mostly the northern panhandle today. Not much of any down to the south, just a few sprinkles this afternoon at Sitka. Next system right through here, rain mostly southwest part of Kodiak Island, or off to the east or up to the north. That's spreading some light rain up to the North Gulf Coast there this afternoon. Just nothing heavy though, anywhere from 500s falling today at Seward, to about a tenth of an inch at Cordova, and then a little bit more there at Yakutat. I believe they picked up 2/10 of an inch of precipitation. Otherwise, places like Nelson Lagoon here with this system had about 1/1500ths of an inch of rainfall, and amounts not all that heavy with this system as well. Again, areas of light rain along the North Gulf Coast today. Showers up the Alaska Range. And again, the isolated thunderstorms here breaking out over the central eastern interior here due to just enough afternoon heating. That may increase a little bit this evening and then fall back to just showers, and those will taper off after midnight tonight. Otherwise, there were some showers back over the northwest, scattered around the western Brooks Range north slope, and also, as I mentioned, kind of a cloudy and unsettled day here with areas IFR, light rain, fog, maybe drizzle. North side of the eastern Aleutians, weak trough here, bringing just mainly clouds to the Pribilof Islands. Could be a few isolated light showers embedded in that, but not hitting any reporting stations. High pressure back out to the west, making for light winds, lots of clouds, lots of low clouds, and patchy areas of fog, but basically dry conditions. A little bit of moisture there with that system in the central Aleutians. Will push off to the southeast tonight, down to the southeast, kind of link up with another system. And light west-northwest flow will keep a chance of light rain or drizzle along the Bering Sea side of the Alaska Peninsula, on over to about Unalaska Island. Otherwise, variable clouds to mostly cloudy with patchy fog for the Pribilof Islands. That same pattern, very light winds over the Aleutians. And then we've got a weak front bringing a chance of rain into the western Arctic coast tonight. Otherwise, this system in the slowly edging northeastward here, not in too big a hurry to move inland, so light rain continues at times along the North Gulf Coast. Chance of rain over the Kenai Peninsula at times, areas of Prince William Sound. We'll also see some rain, possibly getting as far west as northern Cook Inlet. Otherwise, up the Sitton Valley, just look for some scattered showers. Rain will increase over the northern panhandle of this system as more moisture flows in and extends southward, but not all the way to Dixon Entrance. You'll just see mostly cloudy skies down that way. And then for tomorrow, that system breaks up and kicks off to the northeast, and still leaving behind moisture there with that continued southwest flow of the Pacific and several surges of moisture. We'll keep it wet tomorrow over the northern panhandle. Back to Yakutat, tapering off, say by the time you get to Cordova. Mostly dry for Prince William Sound. Risk of a few showers for the Kenai Peninsula. Mostly cloudy otherwise, with chance of showers over the south central Alaska areas. And also along this trough, band of light rain or showers will extend from the central Brooks Range through the Koyukuk Valley on down in the central interior, kind of tapering off down along the Alaska Range. Look for a few sun breaks out over the Togiak Bay area, on up into possibly the Kuskokwim Valley, and then more moisture, light rain, low clouds, fog, IFR spreading southeastward here with this trough into the western Seward Peninsula, on down to St. Lawrence Island. Even some of that moisture will extend up the western Arctic coast there, possibly as far northeast as Wainwright. Otherwise, not too bad of a day over the North Slope, maybe not quite as warm, not quite as much sun, but still risk of a thunderstorm on the eastern North Slope tomorrow afternoon, and up here down toward Eagle as well. Otherwise, really not much in the way of any thunderstorm or lightning activity expected over the remainder of the state. Out to the west, high pressure kind of weakening, but still ridging strong enough here to keep the winds light and conditions dry over the Aleutians and the central southern Bering Sea. Westerly flow coming over the top, carrying a few surges of moisture with it, again bringing this green shaded area into the Yukon Delta coast, more or less in conjunction with a trough farther to the north. And then rain approaching the far western Aleutians will actually slide northeastward tomorrow evening and overnight tomorrow night into the central Aleutians toward Monday morning. And we'll see that does just that. By afternoon, we'll have the frontal boundaries right in there to the almost passing the AKwx area, the cold front. Showers back behind and high pressure shifts eastward. Light winds, dry conditions here all the way up to the southwest coast. Could see partly sunny skies, maybe even mostly sunny for Kodiak Island with that west-northwest breeze off the Aleutian Range there and across the island. Chance of showers here from roughly along the, say Bethel, northeast to McGrath, Nikolai. Chance of thunderstorms in the northeast, just a risk though. Partly sunny back to the northwest. Next front bringing a chance of rain onto the western Arctic coast again, probably in the afternoon hours, and not really any significant winds, but that pattern good for maybe gusts 30-35 miles an hour, places like Cape Lisburne. Chance of moisture on the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. Partly sunny, Cook Inlet, Manusquesit Valley. Risk of an afternoon shower over the Kenai Peninsula, and variable clouds, Prince William Sound, and a little bit better chance of some a little bit more widespread shower activity over the Copper River Basin and the Wrangles in the afternoon hours. And looks like a little less precipitation, but still mostly cloudy for the southeast coast and continued southwest onshore flow. And looking at the low temperatures for tonight, not too bad, 50 to 55 here across the Panhandle. Otherwise, the North Gulf Coast, again with the clouds and rain, but light winds though, mid to upper 40s there, upper 40s for Kodiak Island, mid 40s give or take for Bristol Bay, and near 50 around the McGrath Nikolai area, and then cooling back down to the upper 40s on down the river valleys there out across the Delta to Nunivak Island, mid 40s. Savunga, Pribilofs, Aleutians, and the Arctic coast, right along the coastline, lows right around 40, milder, maybe even lows staying above 50 there for the eastern central North Slope areas. And moving on to high temperatures for tomorrow, back into the lower to mid 70s like today here over the northeast part of the state there, Yukon Flats, Fort Yukon, Chuck-Yitzhak, Beaver, in those areas, mid 60s, 67, maybe 8, 9, possibly 70 here in the central interior in the greater Fairbanks area, but most areas will stay in the 60s. Mid 60s, the Sitna Valley, and especially down toward Big Lake, Kenai Peninsula, possibly rising in the mid 60s, otherwise 50s. 50s, the lower 60s there across the southeast coast, and still in the cool mid to upper 50s there for the Alaska Peninsula. Lower 50s here for the central Aleutians, and a cooler 49 there at St. Paul, 48 at Savunga. And the North Slope rising back into the 60s, possibly reaching 70, but a little bit cooler. And then lows the following morning, mid 30s there along the Arctic coast, down back into the lower to mid 40s over the North Slope, mid 50s in the northeast to upper 40s to the southwest coast. Upper 40s, lower 50s south of the Alaska Range, chillier in the Copper River Basin, and looks like highs in the lower 50s, or I'm sorry, lows in the lower 50s for the southeast coast. Now the highs for Monday afternoon into the lower to mid 60s there, and that's about it. Upper 50s for the North Gulf Coast, pushing 70 Matanuska, Susitna Valley, maybe the Anchorage area into the Kenai Peninsula. 60 to 65 there, northeast Bristol Bay. Near 70, cooling trend up there over the Yukon Flats, and 40s for the North Slope.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First flying weather graphic. North interior looks pretty good tomorrow, starting out VFR all the way down out to the southwest here. Marginal VFR along the coast, on up to the Bering Strait. IFR here on the north side of the western Alaska Peninsula to Unalaska Island. More IFR out over the western Aleutians and along the western Arctic coast. Marginal VFR here across southern Alaska, south of the Alaska Range with areas of IFR. Northern Susitna Valley up toward Denali, also Coast Range, Wrangell Mountains, and marginal VFR for the Panhandle. Afternoon forecast, IFR here, Yakutat all the way down toward Dixon Entrance, and that pushing a ways inland, a little more extensive to the north. VFR, central eastern interior, marginal VFR less extensive tomorrow afternoon here south of the Alaska Range as well as east in the mountains with VFR breaking out, Cook Inlet, Susitna Valley, Kenai Peninsula, IFR, central west side there, the Beaufort Sea coast, and IFR through the strait into the northern Bering Sea and back on out to the southwest. And for Monday morning, a little more widespread IFR up along all of the Arctic coast, coming down along the western central Brooks Range. Solid marginal VFR here across the Seward Peninsula and Norton Sound with pretty extensive IFR now along the southwest coast of the Alaska Peninsula, covering all of the Bering Sea out here in the forecast area and just about all of the Aleutians. Still some VFR here over the central eastern interior, but more marginal VFR, Copper River Basin. Looks like pushing up to the White Mountains, back to the western Alaska Range, and IFR across the eastern part of the Panhandle. Outlook for Monday afternoon, marginal VFR here across all of the southeast coast, up along the North Gulf Coast. IFR, Middleton Island, but just barely reaching the Cape Yakataga area, maybe southern Prince William Sound, otherwise marginal. VFR, Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, down to Kodiak Island, and across Kamishak Bay, here Iliamna and those areas. Marginal VFR, western interior, becomes IFR out along the coast with pretty good IFR holding out over the Bering Sea and much of the Aleutians. Some areas, though, becoming marginal. IFR along the Arctic coast, especially up here over the Noatak Valley areas to Kivalina. And for passes tomorrow, Anatuvik, marginal VFR, going to be a little lower with, looks like more moisture there building, possible thunderstorm threat in the afternoon. So, and that could become IFR too as the conditions deteriorate. Lake Clark and Merrill, occasionally marginal throughout the day. Rainy, could start out VFR, becoming marginal VFR later on. And windy, same trend, becoming marginal VFR into the afternoon. And Isabel, occasionally marginal. Mentasta, marginal VFR, and Tanita, marginal VFR. Portage, look for an improving trend, possibly becoming VFR after an IFR start to the day. And Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR, deteriorating to IFR throughout the afternoon. Freezing level 6,000 feet here across southern Alaska and maybe 7 to 8,000 feet in the north. Quite a gradient here for across the Panhandle, 6,000 feet over the northern areas, 12,000 down over Dixon Entrance, and 14,000 foot freezing levels out over the western Aleutians. Icing looking like this. This area will move into the central Aleutians tomorrow night there, just edging up towards Shimia tomorrow afternoon. Icing here, areas of light to isolated moderate rime icing above about 6,000 feet in the west. Also along the North Gulf Coast could be some areas of considerable moderate rime icing here into the northern Panhandle, and then some mixed icing over the eastern interior areas. Jet stream, upper level low, slowly moving eastward here across southern Alaska. Pretty good jet here coming down up to 100 knots at the maximum here, diminishing about 70 knots over the southeast Bering and the Aleutians, coming back around right into the southeast coast, and some weak ridging occurring here to the west. 9,000 feet southwest, up to 25 knots along the Yukon Delta coast. Pretty windy, west-northwest 30, maybe 35 for St. Lawrence Island to St. Matthew. Otherwise, Pribilof's about 20 knots. Pretty light central western Aleutians 10 to 15 over the interior. and at 3,000 feet, southeast coast, southwest flow 15 to 20 knots. Pretty light here over interior Alaska in the central and eastern areas, picking up to 20 or 15 to 20 here in the west, a little stronger near St. Lawrence Island. Light winds for the Aleutians. Turbulence, not a whole lot here. Northern Panhandle and back Nunivak Island, maybe along the Yukon Delta coast. And after the marine forecasts, or after the break, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
The Space Weather Prediction Center has had a long-standing relationship with the power industry, so they've been aware that solar storms, the geomagnetic storm piece of that, can affect the operation of their systems and induce extra currents and loads on those systems that can either trip those systems offline or in the worst of cases, cause damage. That relationship goes back for several decades. In fact, a big incident in 1989 where part of Quebec was tripped offline that affected something like 6 million customers for about 9 hours. I think that really raised the awareness in the power industries.
When we get the alert, we watch the grid and start looking for issues. Are we seeing a decline in voltage? Are we seeing equipment failures? And we readjust the system to try to mitigate those problems, try to keep the lights on and keep it from going out.
Averaging about 500, 550 kilometers per second.
If we didn't have this early warning, we wouldn't see it until our sensor saw it. Getting more information quicker and faster before the storm hits, not during the storm, is a big improvement.
In the long term, I think what we need and what we're moving toward, the U.S. as a whole, is better modeling, fully understanding this phenomenon, understanding how it would impact specific systems.
Rather than actually experiencing a storm, we can simulate storms in our software and see what the impact is. We try to get ahead of it. We always plan that if there's an outage, how can we keep the lights on? What's the best process to prevent it?
In the end, 5-10 years from now, there's going to be a whole mix of operational procedures driven by what we do on prediction and warning. And then there also will probably be some level of hardware controls to ensure the reliability of the grid.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
There's different types of impacts on communication systems, and the HF we call the high frequency, which is that band of communications 3 to 30 megahertz. But it's a very important band of radio communication because it's used widespread. It's used, for example, by the airlines.
HF radio is most commonly used for position reporting when you're going across the ocean airspace, which is devoid of radar. And ATC can't see you, so it's up to you to report your position and your altitude and your speed.
HF works great most of the time, except during a big flare. And during a big flare, that HF communication capability will be gone within a minute or two. So as soon as we see something happening in there, or we see a flare, it's one of the first things we do is alert the aviation community, hey, big flare, HF's going to be impacted.
Once we know that there's an event going on, then the aviation industry and the airlines can react to that. They can alter their routes over the poles. They can lower the altitudes that they're flying at, or maybe decide not to fly at all in the interest of the passenger safety.
So that's just one example of how HF is used, but the emergency response community will use it a lot too. It's one of their primary backups.
When you've lost connectivity between certain government agencies, it gives you that long-range coverage to talk from out of state to federal governments or from the FEMA locations to the state emergency operations centers.
So if we've got a big hurricane impact in the coastline, whatever big city, we've got the cell towers down and whatnot, we've got emergency communication folks in there. Those folks are very familiar with space weather and how it impacts their systems.
Here in recent years, it was used during Katrina when we had a lot of communications outages down there. It was also used during Hurricane Ike. There was an outage of the telephone circuits with the Texas State Emergency Office, so it was used in both of those situations.
So when we talk about backup, especially for the airlines, typically they'll have SATCOM, so that'll be satellite communication.
The satellite technology that emergency responders use could be GPSs, could be satellite phones, satellite data terminals.
Space weather events can impact SATCOMs. The impact can range from a nuisance to loss of a spacecraft. So we will give them the heads up. If we have space weather events, flares, whatnot, they need to know what's impacting their systems. Situational awareness is key. Time is of essence to these folks. Again, it's life and death.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Sea ice analysis for today, not much different from yesterday. A little bit of thinning areas here along the east side, and of course continuing over the Mackenzie River Bay area, back up to the northwest there, and still looking at a slow regression of sea ice here, helped along with southerly winds over the next 4 or 5 days of maybe 15, possibly 20 nautical miles. Coastal water forecast here, south coast, outer coastline, south 20 to 25, and then those small craft advisories turn southeasterly as you head up the coastline. South 30 knots for Lynn Canal, especially northern Lynn Canal. Small craft advisories from the southeast Stevens Passage. Southeast 15, Clarence Strait. Outlook for Monday, bring it down 25 knots for Lynn Canal and 20 knots for Stevens Passage, both out of the south. Southerlies at 15 for Clarence Strait. The south coast, southwest 15. Seas 8 feet, and then southwest 20 on the north coast with seas 9 to 10 feet. And for Prince William Sound tomorrow, northeast 25 knots. Believe it or not, with 4-foot seas, east 30 knots for the North Gulf Coast areas, western North Gulf Coast, northerlies at 30 knots. And we've got small craft advisories for the Barren Islands for northwest winds at 25 with 8-foot seas, 15 knots for Kamishak Bay, north 15 for Cook Inlet, and seas running 3 to 4 feet. And then for Monday, south to southwest now for the inlet, switching direction, seas still 3 to 4 feet. Small craft advisories Kamishak Bay out of the west, westerlies at 20 for the Barren Islands, southwest 15 here for the western North Gulf Coast, turn northerly on the east side there from about Middleton Island on over a ways, and then lighter southwest winds at 10 with 2-foot seas. Prince William Sound, Kodiak Island, east side here, northwest 25, west 15. Shelikof Strait, west 20 here for Bristol Bay, and 5-foot seas. Lighter variable winds at 10 knots for the Alaska Peninsula, seas 4 to 6 feet. Northwest 15, Sitkinak, Castle Cape. And then those would be westerly at 15 knots across all of the Alaska Peninsula from Sitkinak back into Bristol Bay. Seas running 4 to 5 feet, and that's about it. West 20, though, for Shelikof Strait, and small craft advisories continue with those westerly winds at 25 there along the east side of Kodiak. Fox Islands tomorrow, pretty uniform. Northwest 15, seas 4 to 6 feet. Even lighter winds with a high pressure here over the central Aleutians, 10 knots out of the northwest, and swinging around probably west of Kiska Island to Shimianatu. Those becoming southeast 20 in the afternoon. And then that'll be southwest 20 knots here for all areas west of Adak, 25 knots here north of Adak and Atka in the marine zones there on the north side of the islands. Small craft advisories. Otherwise, 15-knot winds continue for the Fox Islands, now out of the west-southwest, and those seas only 4 to 5 feet. Southwest coast, south of Nunivak Island, we've got west winds at 15 Seas running 3 feet, southwest 20 north of the island there, and that'll extend all the way up into St. Lawrence Island, 15 knots southwesterlies, Norton Sound. Small craft advisories here for the northern Bering Sea. A little bit tighter gradient there, so 25 knots, 8-foot seas, and then back down to 15 for the Pribilofs. Outlook for Monday, west 20 for the St. Paul, St. George area, southwest 20 knots for St. Matthew Island. South of Nunivak Island, westerlies at roughly 15. North of Nunivak Island, southwest, turn southerly for St. Lawrence Island. Variable to north, but light for Norton Sound. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, kind of a squirrely wind situation going there, but really light, 10 knots or less. And southwest on the central coast, pretty light there, even on the west side, west at 10. And north 15 there. Point Hope to, or Cape Lisbon, or from Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson, south of Cape Thompson, southwest of 20. Outlook on Monday, westerlies rule here from Wales all the way up along the west side, then kick up to 20 knots on the central coast, back down to 15 from the west-northwest for the east side. And for tonight, again, a weak front brings a chance of rain to the western Arctic coast. They're down to probably Point Hope, probably won't reach Kivalina. Otherwise, fairly dry, just isolated, widely scattered showers here over the interior eastward, and those will all be subsiding. Rain, light rain at times continues north Gulf Coast. Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, possibly as far west as the Chugach areas, Cook Inlet showers, Alaska range showers. Rain increasing, though, over the central and northern panhandle. That kicks through and weakens tomorrow, but still southwest flow, a couple of troughs keep it unsettled and damp, especially in the northern panhandle. Back to the west, scattering out to isolated showers, Prince William Sound, and it looks even drier the next day. Thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.